All right, I think that's Paget's signal for me to get started. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Caitlin, and I'm the Senior Associate Director at the IDEA Lab for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. So most of you I know are quite familiar with Lilie, but those of you who may not be as familiar with Lilie, we are the home of entrepreneurship at Rice. So we have courses, co-curricular opportunities, a space and more resources for founders to launch companies now at Rice or post Rice, as well as help our students just learn the skill sets and the mindsets to think entrepreneurially and learn how to change the world in whatever endeavor they may pursue. And so we are so excited to have Hannah Chug here today to join us for our last Ladies Who Launch of 2020. This is a series where we get to have very intimate conversations with innovative females, entrepreneurs and investors, just ladies who are several steps ahead of us in their journey and who have very graciously taken the time to share their insights and lessons learned along the way. And so we get an hour to learn about Hannah and her journey and try to apply the lessons that she's learned in her life to our lives. And so I want to introduce Hannah. So Hannah is a courageous and ambitious woman, and she's also a pioneer in the design world. And Hannah, she grew up a dual citizen in South Korea and in the US, and had been traveling back and forth. And then upon entering high school, she was in Korea and she had to choose between art and science. And she didn't really want to make that decision as a freshman in high school. So she chose very bravely to come to the US by herself. And she lived in Wisconsin with a host family. And so I think her courage just reared itself very young. So she went on after high school to pursue biomedical engineering at Northwestern. And she quickly learned that that wasn't exactly up her alley. And so she decided to pursue mechanical engineering because she knew she wanted to make things and she knew she wanted to have an impact with the things that she built. Very shortly after she made that decision, she met the faculty leader and a friend who she later went on to start this internationally recognized program called Design for America. And from there, she turned one of the projects that she was working on into a company named Sproutel, and she provided toys and resources to children with chronic illnesses. And so with that, I want to hand it over to Hannah. She's going to share more about her journey and some of the lessons that she learned along the way. And I know that many of you are trying to figure out how you want to leave your legacy. And I hope that Hannah inspires you, especially our current students right now, that you can do it right now at Rice, and you can make an impact and a difference like where you are today, and you don't need to push it off to the future or post Rice. So with that, I'd love to hand it over to Hannah, and she's going to share a little bit about her journey, and then we'll open it up to Q&A at the end. But feel free, as you have questions that pop up, feel free to post them in the chat. All right, Hannah, thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. It feels really, really awesome to be here and share my story. As Caitlin mentioned, my name is Hannah, and I'm a designer and a co-founder of 2 award-winning organizations. So Sproutel, which is a healthcare product development and research studio, and Design for America, a national student organization, which Rice has a chapter, that mobilizes students to solve problems using human-centered design. As Caitlin mentioned, in the last decade, I had a pleasure to create so many interactive companions for children with various health conditions. So I have some examples here. The first one is Jerry the Bear, which is an interactive teddy bear that teaches children with type 1 diabetes. So using your phone, you can scan different parts of Jerry's body to give insulin, check his blood sugar level, all with this teddy bear. And then next, we also created this My Special Afterlife duck, a robotic duck for children with cancer. So imagine when you're in the hospital, you feel lonely and hard to express your feelings. You feel comforted with the duck, and also put different tokens to duck in different emotions. And lastly, and most recently, we created this little creature named Purple, which is a creature to help all children to feel less anxious and less stressed. And all of these are all based on our team really interacting and talking to lots of families to understand what their emotional needs are and what their hopes and dreams. And I think these insights helped us to realize what are the core emotions that we want to address in creating this product and create something that they can really feel resonated with. One of the big joy in the past decade is the amount of impact that we have created. Of course, that impact, I can't do it by myself. It's with working with a team of people who share my values, our values in social impact, and also working with people and partners who also share that. So it's been amazing to see this product in the hands of over 10,000 children in their homes as they go to the hospital, to see how their daily lives have changed in talking about their conditions with families, but also people in schools and teachers in different communities that they're in. But today, I can talk about this product a lot because there's a lot of stories and lessons I've learned. But today I really want to highlight more on my journey as a female entrepreneur, creating these two organizations, because there's a lot of things I've observed, a lot of things I've felt and learned in this journey, and hope that we can take this as a conversation, because I'm curious to hear what you all are thinking, and it can be a bit of a resource to kind of answer some of them, because entrepreneurs and this entrepreneurial journey are also different. Even though you might be in the same healthcare field or in the same toy field, your individual path is so different that I don't think there is a set formula to achieve success, to be honest. But I think the power of entrepreneurship is to talk about each other's journey and be vulnerable, to talk about highs and lows, mistakes you have made, because from there you find insights to see how you want to apply that learning into your journey, and you can make it something new for yourself. So with that, when I think back of how did I become an entrepreneur and how did all of these started, to be honest, I was thinking about this and realized that it took me a long time for me to feel comfortable calling myself an entrepreneur. And it sounds odd because my path has been very entrepreneurial. I've founded 2 organizations. Like, what do you mean that you didn't feel comfortable calling yourself an entrepreneur? And I think it's because, in my life and in my community, I have had students and people who approach me saying, I want to be an entrepreneur. How can I be that? And I think for me, these journeys like being an entrepreneur was not a first goal for me to create these organizations. It kind of happened serendipitously. It kind of happened because I felt that I was the right person to help bring this vision to life. But for me, like, that didn't really connect with the entrepreneur job or career itself. And when I think back in the different paths I've taken, as Caitlin mentioned, when I came back to the States to pursue my creativity, that required a lot of big bet, and it took a lot of courage. Changing my major from biomedical to mechanical engineering, that took a lot of courage. And deciding to start Design for America too, with 3 co-founders I've never met before, but all I know is they share the same values with me. That takes a lot of courage too. So I think, looking back, when I think about my comfort level of taking this, making those big bets, and having the self-confidence that I could do something and create impact, I think that in itself is very entrepreneurial. And I think, as I worked on Sproutel for 8 years and 9 years, it took me a long time to then feel like, I know my strengths, and I know that I've learned a ton, I've grown a ton. I feel confident I can call myself an entrepreneur because I can comfortably say all the things that I've learned. So, when I think back of my early 20s self, if I say, like, you're going to be an entrepreneur, I'll be very uncomfortable to be like, what do you mean? Like, I don't know how you feel. Like, what do you mean? Is that future going to be me? So look back then, I wish a future self came back to me to assure me, to be like, reduce your anxiety, you'll be okay. Like, just keep doing what you're doing. But speaking in this topic, I think the other part that didn't hit me as an entrepreneur at that time is that I never had people around me who were entrepreneurs. So my family were in academia. So, the path of becoming a PhD, a professor, was really common for me. And I met a lot of people there. But for me, like many people said, starting a business is doomed for failure. Starting a business is really risky. So nobody really told me about the joy and the challenges in a good way you're going to have as an entrepreneur. So I think in hindsight, because I never saw a woman example or Asian person becoming an entrepreneur, I didn't know that vision could be me. And I think because of that, when starting Design for America and Sproutel, I definitely felt a lot of pressure in terms of I am now a role model to help many other girls and students who wants to be entrepreneurs, and I need to be a good role model. And I felt that maybe this is because I'm a woman and an Asian woman. Being an entrepreneur for me also had an immense social responsibility, because it's not only about, it was less about being successful. It was more about, can I comfortably talk about my failures with the goal that I can uplift these other people looking at me as a role model that I can empower them. And I think it took me a long time to figure out what my voice is, figure out what I feel comfortable sharing, and how to leverage this as my strengths to move on to the next chapter. But I think that's where, understanding my values, understanding what I care was extremely important, because, in sharing the stories, like, how do I want to build relationships with these people? Like, how do I want to leverage my strengths in a way to share a very clear message on what is entrepreneurship, what is it like to start a business, and what is it like to have the social responsibility you're going to carry through. Speaking of values, as I reflect, my values in my early 20s and my values now has changed a ton. I think my early 20s, I'm really naive. I just went to college, so I don't know much of, what I want in life or what I care in life. But I think at that time, the two things that are really important for me were continuous learning. And I don't know what I'll be learning, but by surrounding myself with people and taking on new challenges, I know I'm going to learn. I want to continue that. And the second part was solving a problem that's really dear to my heart. And the second part for me was that growing up, my father's family had type 2 diabetes. And it was a big impact in my life because, it's a genetic disease in our family. And when my father got diagnosed when I was in 6th grade, he was extremely shy to talk about his condition. And he was really upset many times. And for me, it was really scary to see your dad pricking his fingers to check his blood sugar level multiple times a day. And it definitely felt like a turning point in our relationship. But my wise mother decided that we are going to change our whole lifestyle in our family. And that meant, eating the diet that my dad is having, the low carb diet. Sometimes we will go on walks together. And sometimes I'll prick my finger too, to make sure that my dad is not the only one pricking his fingers by himself. And throughout the months, what I've seen was a big change in my dad's lifestyle. My dad started to talk openly about his diabetes. He also wanted to coach other people who are newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And what I've learned in my childhood was that when you build a supportive community around a person, especially a patient, from the feeling of not feeling alone and feeling empowered, the quality of life can really change. And I think from there, by understanding the importance of having that community, not only in the patient's life, but also in your own life, that was something where I wanted to keep building in my life too, and also help other people to create those communities. And for that reason, working on Jerry the Bear for kids with type 1 diabetes was a perfect fit for me, because even though I don't know a lot, diabetes itself was something that I can relate to a lot with the patients, but also from that, the idea of Jerry is becoming your life and your community, that relationship itself was nothing new. It's something that I have felt before. And I think from there, by having the clarity, I was able to find mentors who I can talk about those values clearly, and I feel comfortable telling them I don't know anything, or I don't know this topic. Can you ask me a right question for me to navigate the right answers? And from there, I was able to find those people, and also was able to find my co-founder to launch Sproutel together. And I think from that, I think that aligning values is so important, because in the end, you want to find founders who are complementary to you and founders who might have different experiences. Sometimes you want to find people just like you. There's different forms of relationships, but in the end, what is really important is the foundational values of what you're trying to achieve is really important. So for example, in creating Sproutel with my co-founder, Aaron, we are very different. We have different opinions, but in those 8.5 years of time, we never had a single argument about the mission that we're trying to create around social impact. And because those are the values that we definitely align together, and we knew that there are different processes to get there. Aligning values is really interesting, because it's also sometimes a physical feeling, because starting Design for America, starting Sproutel, and recently for me leaving Sproutel, it was weird. This is like a recent realization that I had a same physical feeling. And what I mean by that is, in the past, you have all these plans. As you know, in college, you want to graduate, you want to take all these courses. It's a very segmented planning stage in a good way. But when you decide to do something that is right for you, and you can see yourself in the larger vision that you're trying to achieve, it's kind of like you feel the electricity in you, like a spark, and then your head becomes like this, like it has this kind of fizzy, feeling of like relief, and then you realize and then you feel this immense feeling of joy. And I think that joy it's like the time that you definitely felt the clarity that you're looking for. And once you felt that clarity, you realize that all this planning I had in the past, it is helpful, but it really doesn't matter anymore. Like once you realize this is the right thing to do, that you will figure out the way to build new plans to get there. And that plan actually, with the clarity that you have, it's simpler. You can plan the faster, and then you can mobilize the people around you to make that into action. And I think Design for America for me is, I knew that creating Design for America can allow me to find more like-minded people in the same way to create social impact. So it made perfect sense why I want to be involved. And to be honest, from that, I made lifelong friends, even met my co-founder for Sproutel, and it was a right choice for me to build that platform. Sproutel too, finding the co-founder and knowing that even though Jerry might be a small project at that time, for me at that time, the idea of bringing Jerry to all hands of children with type 1 diabetes was ambitious, but I knew that we were the right people to do that. And from that on, you realize the lessons that we learned from creating Jerry, you can extend that to other conditions and other people, and it makes sense to do that. And even recently, as I left my role as head of design at Sproutel, and it felt the right time. I wanted to be aligned. I wanted to be closer to family, want to spend more time in South America, US. My values align, and those values can change over time. And still, I was able to find a way to how to still help Sproutel by being on the board. So there's different transitions of roles that you can take in your startup journey. So with that, I was thinking about what are some favorite memories that I had in creating these two journeys. I think a lot of them comes from Sproutel, because I think it was my first job out of college and building this company, and a lot of things has happened. I had crazy experiences from finding our first investor in an elevator while giving an elevator pitch inside an elevator. It was incredible. It kind of happened in terms of I was holding our toolbox to 3D print before 3D print was really prevalent in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And someone asked, what's your company is about? And my co-founder and I just talked about our company, and then the person gave us a check. That happened in an elevator one time. There's a couple of times we went to the White House to show our work and demo our product to the former President Obama. There's also a time where I won a pitch competition where Warren Buffett was a judge. I mean, there's a lot of big name people I've got to meet and travel different places. But to be honest, the most meaningful experience I had in creating this company was less about winning the competition or meeting very famous people. It was really when you build a special relationship with families. Because through this work, when creating this, my role, not only about leading the design process, many of my role was about being in the homes or in the hospital to understand what the users are looking for. And from that is you get to meet families in different emotional states. Sometimes families had a really good day and they're really open to talk to you about their whole day, what they're really happy with. But sometimes you meet people with a child who just finished his surgery or just finished his chemo, where their families are really exhausted, but they want to participate. And I think what I've learned from that is, separate myself as a product designer and entrepreneur. I'm really there to have a conversation with them. And it's important for me to create safe spaces. And when you create those safe spaces, you get to realize that families are eager to help you with your product because they believe in your mission, but they feel comfortable sharing their vulnerable stories, especially around emotions, because sharing feelings is really, really hard. but they're there to be their open selves to help you succeed. And I think what I've learned from that is, in addition to the social responsibility I felt, this is the time I felt as a designer, what my responsibility is as someone who creates the safe spaces and help people feel comfortable to be vulnerable. And it's been amazing to see those insights that we have gathered from these conversations apply to the product, and then those families also celebrating our work because we have listened to them. And I think that has been the truth for creating Jerry and the Duck and Purple, where that, the importance of that and being that connector of people and building relationships is something where I don't think I realized the big value of that when I was younger because I didn't know. But now it's something where I want to carry through for the rest of my life because that is where a lot of the special things can happen. And those people can help you succeed for many other chapters in your life. One of the questions people have asked is there anything that you wish you could have done differently, or things that I've learned later on, it might feel too late? I think looking back, many of the mistakes we've made, I think was for a reason. There's times where I could have given a better pitch. There are times where I could have tried a different process to speed up the development process, or even saying no to people that is not going to be valuable. I mean, as a woman, you might hear the story many times. Sometimes you go to a meeting where people will not look at your eyes when you talk, or people who will say no for not a rational reason. And looking back, if I had the courage to say no, I would have not taken this meeting in the first place. But in the end, I've learned, and it was thankful that I was not there alone. I was with my co-founder to kind of process those feelings together and thoughts that we can move forward and not look back. One of the things I've learned is that the idea of culture in the company is so important. I think oftentimes when you're small, you might be a one-person team or a two-people team. Culture feels like a very grandiose thing that you feel something that you might be able to address later down the road. But in fact, I think culture you need to address from the day one. Similar to how you find a co-founder that you align in values, you have to think about how you want to apply those values to build your company, even in culture. And culture, that means things like, when we do research, how are we going to think about racial justice and racial equity? When you talk about marketing, how do you want to represent ourselves in a outward public facing images or inward? Even in policies, in hiring and all the people, how can you have this conversation thoughtfully from the get-go so that we can build a DNA from scratch? And I think what I've learned talking to other entrepreneurs too, even in the 3 months or 6 months launching the company, startup time scale is very, very fast. So that later on, the DNA is ready to form to really change that. Sometimes you need like the bigger change by hiring a lot of people that forces you to think that way. But oftentimes your startup company might be a small team for a long time, and that has been for Sproutel. So as you all think about your next path as an entrepreneur or being in different communities, really think about how you want to align your team in values and also how you think about culture, because it's not just talking about it, thinking about those things, you need to act based on that. And also, when thinking about this team and people around you, I think mentor network is extremely important. One of the things that was hard for me in the past few years was that I think this is more because Sproutel was my first job as an entrepreneur and also right after college, that I often felt that many of the relationships I've built in conferences or even meetings, a lot of them are really, really transactional. You meet for a certain, like, can you intro me to this investor? Or sometimes, can you connect me to this other entrepreneur in this healthcare field? But the people who need you the most are not the ones who are transactional, but actually see you as a genuine you. And I often think of that as, do I have mentors who see me as Hannah who works at Sproutel? Or do I have mentors who see me as Hannah, who happens to be the second chapter of her life at Sproutel? And I think from that point on, even though it sounds similar, it's very different because a second group of people are invested in your growth. They're curious about, you as a human being, you with your personality, how you're going to tackle the next steps. And they're invested, they're eager to hear what you have learned in your journey. Versus first people, it's kind of like, if you don't get that connection, You never really keep in touch. You can also, sometimes you can reach out to them for connections, but you never really talked about those values before. And what I've learned is that realization came to me about 3 years ago, and it was really daunting because I felt that I have this over, 700 people on LinkedIn. Like, who are the people that I can really connect with? And I started reaching out to them, and happens to be all those people who want to talk about those values is for me around families, relationships, and also, racial justice, happens to be mostly women and mostly people of color. And it was not by choice. It was very natural how they came to be. And it's been amazing. When I go to them, I can talk about those very openly. They can talk about their experiences. In those stories, you get to realize that what are the other setbacks they have had as an entrepreneur. And oftentimes it's about their own personal health. Sometimes it's a woman having a miscarriage, or sometimes women who had an early cancer diagnosis in their 20s that really changed their life. And you realize that many women have these very personal stories, but the field of entrepreneurship, because of lack of women, is not a comfortable space for them to share that. And that's the point I realized where in my early 20s, when I thought that me as a role model was a social responsibility to help children, now as me as an adult, by finding people who feel comfortable sharing their stories, how can I empower this woman in the closest way possible? And I think that view of relationship really changed for me as I meet more people. In addition to this diverse community, it was also different in age groups. I think before I had mainly, friends around my age who are also young entrepreneurs, but now with this mentor network, I have, friends who are early college graduates all the way to women in their 70s. And it's been really amazing to hear, there might be entrepreneurs or people who work with entrepreneurs, but they had a different life viewpoints. And people even had, when they went to the college in 70s, interdisciplinary major was not even a thing. So people never got their full degree. I mean, you meet people in different backgrounds. But I think for me, that was helpful to realize all these women, even though they don't have a exact same path as I did, they were able to become this genuine human being that I like. I want to be like them. And I think that's a view of like viewing entrepreneurs as a career track, but trying to find people who have the entrepreneurial spirit that I want to surround myself with. So with that, my journey now, as I left Sproutel, is to really take this year as a year to experiment. Because I think now my goal is to align my values in the closest way possible and make very conscious choices how I want to live my life. And I think for that, I don't know how to choose that until I try things. And I think that's the idea of experiment is really important. So now what I'm doing is I'm trying to, is kind of like setting up a lab of many mini experiments. So one might be advising a startup that is all women team working in hardware, creating a women's health product. That has been amazing because it's a group of women where, this wearable goes inside your bra, and people feel comfortably open, undress their shirt and show this is how it works. It doesn't work. It's a very comfortable space, and you can talk about those intimate issues. The second part is being a board member at a local nonprofit that bridges classical music and racial justice. And it's really amazing because it's a nonprofit. They've been around for 25 years, but the way they talk about racial justice and racial equity from many years ago is something that I've never experienced before. So how can I learn from the way they have these conversations and how to support the community around them by teaching classical music to underserved communities? What are the things that I can learn and observe that I can apply in my life? The third part is, as Caitlin mentioned, I spend my time both in South Korea and United States. I built my whole community in the United States, who I got to build lifelong friends, but can I find a community too in Korea? And I think that's closer to, I want to be close to family, that's really important. But I should give a chance as an adult self to see, can I find people who can openly talk about social impact and values in relationship also, that I can speak in Korean fully in a different country. And I think that's really exciting. And I think with all of these, it's, to be honest, it's a very daunting journey, but it goes back to the same feeling where I know that it's the right thing for me to do. I feel like it's the right time for me to navigate this. And I know that as long as I surround myself with the right people and asking the right questions and not having the self-confidence that I have the strengths, I'm aware of myself that I can make this happen. I think it will lead to something like Sproutel Design for America that I'm very excited to work with. So with that, that is my short story of what I've worked in the past 10 years. And would love to answer any question that you might have so I can give more details as I answer your curious questions.
Thanks so much, Hannah. We do have one question that came in through the chat, and so feel free to post more questions, and then you can also unmute yourself because this was a pretty casual conversation. But so Wendy asked how you met your co-founders. So I guess you could talk about both DFA and then Sproutel.
Yeah, for DFA, so both journeys were very different. So for DFA, we had one faculty founder and 3 student founders. I was one of the 3 student founders. The faculty founder had a meeting and just calling students with a very broad idea that who wants to create change and who wants to be a part of this. It was very like hurrah kind of message. And we went to the meeting, and that's how I met my 2 other co-founders, Bart and Yuri, and we really resonated with. And at that time, though, it was a group of like 8 people. Many people were interested, but in the end, it was us 3 and Liz, our faculty co-founder, who just had long conversations. And we talked about where do we see DFA, and this was back in like 2008. Where do we see DFA in 2020? Where do we see DFA in 2025? And we felt really comfortable talking about the large vision, and and Liz also talking about how she sees this network building within universities. So I wouldn't say it was like a first time we are the right ones to work on the organizations together. It took many conversations to feel that we were the right people to really launch this. For Sproutel, a co-founder, Aaron, was also in Design for America, and Jerry the Bear, because of the DFA project, it was an extracurricular project for us, and Aaron was a part of it. And we worked on the project together. We later created our own courses to create Jerry together. And in the end, he wanted to work on Jerry. I also wanted to work on Jerry. So our paths kind of aligned there. But what was really interesting was that, Aaron wanted to launch his own business. I think because his parents are artists, so he saw a lot of that entrepreneurial kind of self-starters in his family. So I think that was more natural for him. For me, it kind of wasn't. So going back to my family being academia, this career path was not even an option for me in my mind when I was a student. So I actually interned at different places. So one year I interned at a Ford Motor Company, learned that I thrive in creating problems I can see a big picture. And then the second part was working at a Radius product development company, which is design studio, and learned that even though I've learned a ton, I really need to work on projects I'm really passionate about. And for me, once I went through all those trials and journeys, it took me and then I realized what kind of story do I want to create for myself. And I felt that continuing the story of social impact that I've built in my college years felt the most natural for me. And that's the moment I realized Jerry is the right thing to do. And when Aaron mentioned, do you want to do Jerry with me? It was like, yes, within 5 seconds. And that's kind of how we decided to start Sproutel together.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's something that we at Lilie are thinking about very carefully is I think we have, depending on your interests and your worldview of how you grew up, we've identified a couple personas, right? So we have students that are comfortable with this ambiguity of entrepreneurship, and that really excites them. I think there's like this feel of business, but for some other students, that whole realm, because it's male dominated, because it's like businessy, or so they think, can be quite intimidating. But this other group of students are very, very interested in creating change, making impact, and creating this legacy, which these 2 groups go hand in hand. So what would you say to this group of students that are very interested in social impact, but they might be intimidated with this term entrepreneurship? And what do you think, how do you think building kind of an entrepreneurial mindset and skill set can help? How do you think that could help this group of like socially minded students?
I think starting with the idea of just being an entrepreneur is actually really scary, because I think, there's so many people I think oftentimes in the field of entrepreneurship, you see a lot of success stories. You never get to see a lot of fail stories, or it's not even failing. It's people who are not unicorn successes. But in fact, 95 or like majority of the people, they're in the latter group. And I think that's where, you know, in the media example of you see entrepreneurs, it is really intimidating because you feel like you need to create the successes. But to be honest, entrepreneur successes looks very different. Because in Sproutel case, people might say your business didn't grow X amount of revenue per year, business-wise, you have failed. But for us, yeah, like that's important, but our value is always about how many people we are helping and impacting. And that's a very different, you know, value metric that you need to think of in talking about successes. So I think from there, what I would recommend is for starters, I think figuring out, and I think this can change, like so your idea of success can change, but as a starting point, what kind of success matters to you? Is it impact, or is it financial success, or what is that combination? Because as you're starting a business, you need to think of financial successes, but as an impact to help people, you know, it's a different way to think about those success models. And then second is, I think, understanding what are you really good at, what are the areas that you want to grow, and what are areas that you lack. And areas that you lack, who do I have to talk to help me address those issues? And I think the third part, I think, is really hard because you have to be comfortable to share that you don't know, and you have to be comfortable to share that I made mistakes. Can you help me? And I think a lot of the entrepreneurs, they thrive on the third one because they're not because they don't dwell on past mistakes. You know, they don't blame themselves. They think about what is a situation that caused me to do this? How could I have done differently? And also, how can I change for the next one? And you try to not dwell on the past. It doesn't mean that you're ignoring the past. It's like you don't let that set you back. You just move forward. I think as long as you feel that you have those three traits in you, I think anyone can be an entrepreneur. I think a lot of them is emotions, is how you feel about yourself, how you perceive yourself, and how you want to elevate yourself. If you have that stability in you to do that, I think like anyone can be an entrepreneur, in my opinion.
That's interesting. Yeah. So you have to think about what success means to you, and fiscally or non-fiscally. But the mindset of an entrepreneur will help you get to success, despite what your metrics may be. That's very interesting. Yeah. So we have a couple questions that kind of go hand in hand. So one is, how can, if we have, you know, a student or alumni thinking about whether entrepreneurship might be the right path for them, how can they think through whether it's a good fit versus working within a nonprofit or within a larger company? And then in that vein, you started a company right out of college. Do you have any advice for those that might be looking at this path of entrepreneurship, how to balance being a recent grad and then starting a company?
Yeah, I think that's the second question is a little bit easier to answer. Looking back, I would recommend fully to start a company right after college. And the reason why is, I think it depends on what you want to do. I think for some people that feels really natural, and some people it's not. And this is not the idea to discourage it. I think sometimes working with people who have more experience for a couple of years to understand the industry, understand the workplace, is actually helpful to think about how different environments, school versus workplaces are. And I think that, you know, it doesn't require a long time, but that's also a place. And then someone has asked, like, how do you find your co-founders? Sometimes you find your co-founders when working together. Sometimes, you know, you might be in the same field creating, you know, as fellow designers or working with other people where, you know, you might realize you want to do something cool on your own with those people, and that's how you meet them. Because sometimes school is a great place, like Rice is a great place to meet a lot of people and build your network. But imagine how much you can grow again more when working together and immersing yourself in people with different age groups. So I think this comes back to understanding like what you need, because it might be experience, It might be exposure, or also, you know, exposing yourself to already built processes and see how that works and how that doesn't work. So I think with that, you know, I don't think there's a set answer, but all I can say is like, you know, if college time it feels like the right time for you and you have the perfect fit to do something, definitely do it. And if that experiment can work really well, or it doesn't work, but it will still build for your next chapter and your successes. But it's totally okay to not do it in college, because people have different needs.
Very true. So kind of going back to the first question that was asked right before that one, if someone, would you say, like, are there any considerations someone should be thinking about, whether it's personality traits, you know, working styles, or possibly values in terms of whether they would make an entrepreneur versus a more traditional, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, career path?
I think it's hard to separate those two. I think for anyone, because, and again, like, successful is different. It doesn't mean you have to launch a company to be successful. You could have like amazing project initiative within the company that feels very entrepreneurial. And I think both are powerful. And I think the big difference is going to an existing company, you already have scale. And when you go into an entrepreneurial startup mode, you have to build a scale. So that scale might look very different. So I think it's incorrect to kind of separate those two paths, you know, so dividedly about the success looks there. But what I've seen, and I think is common for both, is you really have to surround yourself with people that you really enjoy working with. And I think that is people who are complementary to you, people who listens. For example, you can have different opinions, but is this person willing to have a healthy conversation with me to co-create the solution and understand our differences? And I think that's the same for founders dynamic. It's the same for any team. And I think I truly believe that if you have the right team, you could really build and create anything. And I think that is needed for any environment that you go in, even when you're volunteering in your community. And so I think with that, I think it's important to understand what type of people that you thrive, what type of community that you thrive in, and thinking about building a diverse team in skill sets and backgrounds and culture, you know, who will be your dream team? And I think finding those people and connecting with them early is really important.
I like that. Yeah, it's who you work with is so important. And I'm blessed to have a very fun team at Lilie to work with. So can you tell us, and feel free if anybody else has, I think we might have gotten another question, so I'll hold mine. So in addition to getting experience in established companies, what other things can students or alumni do now to prepare for possibly like a path in entrepreneurship? Classes, books, any recommendations?
I think all of you being in this talk or joining others talk series hosted by Lilie, I think it's a really, really good start. When I think back at Northwestern as a student, there are many times I skipped classes just to go to lectures because I wanted to hear other business people talking about their journeys. And I found them really, really meaningful. I think now there are tons of podcasts, and compared to 10 years ago, there's a lot more offerings that people are doing. There's a women's network group that you can join, or even recordings of conferences, talks that you have. All of those can feel really broad, but start with the specific topic that you're interested in. That could be women in entrepreneurship, that could be in healthcare, that could be in design. Start from there and follow people who really resonate with you in their talking points. And I think from there, you will find I want to learn about this person's perspective. This person talks about that person. Start from there instead of going so broad. But I think, if like Lilie and Rice University, if any, take advantage of many resources as possible, because these are really hard to find when you leave school. And also talk to people, talk to peers who are interested in entrepreneurship, talk to folks like Caitlin and Kyle who are experts, who are surrounding themselves and making programs for entrepreneurship. And I think from there, once these mentors know what you're looking for and what you care about, they can be the connectors to connect you with the right people that you can extend these conversations with. So with that mindset, like leverage the people's network as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm really excited about our alumni network, is that it is a solid group of people who have done the scary path and providing kind of just examples of how to do it. And it makes it a lot less scary when you can see people just a couple steps ahead of you doing the one thing that you're looking to do. So I'm interested in learning a little bit more about your latest decision to leave Sproutel and how you worked through that. So it seems to me like you've had if I'm understanding your story correctly, you didn't come from the path of entrepreneurs, so you made that very scary leap into entrepreneurship with DFA and then Sproutel, and then like you have a very like successful career and a successful company. So taking that next leap of leaving and doing something totally brand new, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and if it was my parents, they'd be like, even, you know, at age of 32, like my parents like, oh my gosh, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Or they would be. And so like, how do you balance that? And what made you very confident in that decision, and kind of how did you work through this in your mind?
Yeah. Fortunately, I have a very supporting parents. I remember when I decided to do Sproutel, they were really scared. And then I promised them, like, if you want me to be happy, you need to support me. So like, either way, like, if I don't have your support, I'm not going to be happy. And that doesn't meet your goal to raise a happy daughter. And then I think I made a promise that I'm not going to eat ramen noodles every day. I'll actually eat healthy meals. And that was like a good, like, yes, like, let me pursue my journey creating Sproutel. For leaving though, it wasn't easy. I think like it took me many years to realize what that meant. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, many women have their personal stories why they have made big decisions. For me, 3 years ago, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and they're based in South Korea. And, you know, fortunately, his first chemo ended earlier this year, and he's started his second chemo, but he's coping really, really well. But the past 3 years, I was able to go back to Korea maybe like 2 or 3 times a year, because, you know, supporting parents emotionally is really hard abroad, and sometimes you need that physical contact to really support them. And it was a big shift in terms of, I felt like in the past I was only thinking about Sproutel success and running, and it was the first time to realize, oh, I have to think about family and think about Sproutel success. But I learned that when I'm happy, I'm also energized to create Sproutel, and that parent dynamic and supporting them was really important to me. And I think until my dad finished his first chemo, it was the first time to kind of realize what just happened in the past 3 years, because it was a long journey supporting them in those times. And I think with COVID, you know, working COVID is terrible. And but it allowed me to stay home longer by working remotely. And it kind of forced me to have that, you know, the time I needed to reflect and reprioritize my life. And what I realized was, if 10 years ago my value was creating this impact with this product for Sproutel, now it's I want to be happy, and it's important for me to be happy and healthy to create really healthy products in the process wise to help more people. And I think that's when I realized that, you know, in the next 10 years, I want to change the way I view life, where I prioritize those family relationships, and also from that, immersing myself with more people, different people with different cultures. And I think that's where, you know, I can really apply my learning from the past 10 years, you know, but actually, you know, make that bigger in the new journey. So it was a long time to get there, but when I decided to leave, I felt that I was the most confident and the happiest of myself when I made that decision. And it's really amazing to have like all the support from, you know, my team, my investors, to celebrate this new success. So yeah, it was, you know, did I imagine myself leaving the company this year? No. But, you know, but looking back, do I have any regrets? And I still think that's the right decision for me. Yes. So yeah, so I think this, going back, like this year of experiment, I'm really, really excited about. I don't know how it's going to pan out, to be honest, but I feel that, you know, every decision I make to even advise a company or join this nonprofit's board felt like the right thing for me to do. And I think I'm going to just keep that feeling ahead and see what happens. And I think will lead me to the right directions from there.
That's amazing. I'm sure that was like a lift off your shoulders once you finally like made that decision. And I'm excited that you get the time to spend more time with your family. That's wonderful. And I really liked what you said about confidence there, because I do think there's an element of just maturity and confidence that like can only come with experience, but we can do what we can now to like hear your story and other people's story and try to just try to internalize that confidence in our own lives. So thank you so much for sharing. I know that was a personal story. And then my one last question to you is, what are you most excited about, let's just say like in this next year? Is there one particular like project that aligns with your values or anything, or it could be totally like non-professional related, but what's one thing that really excites you?
That's a great question. I think there are two things. One is I'm really excited about my trip to Korea because it's I think 3 months is my first time being there the longest since I was in middle school. So it's a big leap, and I have no expectations, to be honest, but I hope that the new connections will lead to, I'm excited to make new connections there. And also I'm really excited to stay close to family because it's something that I really missed having for a long time. The second one is with this time that I have, I've been illustrating a lot and dabble into animation. So I'm hoping to submit a manuscript this December. So I'm working really hard to work on the picture book and hoping to build that hobby more so that I can create more stories. I can continue my passion, creating something meaningful for children, because I think that'll be always there. And the third one is I have a couple of friends, speaking of relationship and having different age groups, I've been practicing how to be a cool auntie to my friends' kids and also to my friends' dog nephews and nieces. So, that is something I haven't expected, but I've been really enjoying, giving all the love and support and, be a friend with a 7-year-old, but also be a cool auntie at the same time, something I don't have. And I've been really enjoying doing that.
Oh, that is so amazing. Well, it sounds like you have a really exciting year ahead of you. And we're going to have to get a copy of that book signed by you.
Hopefully. No expectations. But but
all
now
good
it's like,
things, 2021.
Yeah. But it's like, I think now it's, I think as Sproutel, you focus so much about the impact and the successes and the result. Now it's like the fact that I'm trying new things, it's awesome. So it's I'm relearning what it was like to start something new again. And hoping that all these little steps will lead to, it's all leading to the right directions. I'm really excited to explore more and reflect more what I'm learning from these.
Sounds like you have the entrepreneurial bug. So we're excited to see what happens with you and your life and the impact that you're going to make over the next year and several years. And thank you so much for spending an hour with us. We really appreciate it. And for those of you on the line, we have an exciting lineup of speakers for this next semester. So we'll be sure to share those with you over the next several weeks. And we also have, I don't know, Paja, if you could possibly drop the line in the chat, but we have a talk coming up tomorrow night as well with the founder of Zoom, and Eric will be speaking about his entrepreneurial journey as well as his vision for Zoom as it intersects with higher education for the future. So that will be also exciting. So we had a fantastic week with the founder of DFA and Sproutel and Zoom. And for those of you who may not know, DFA has a very large and successful chapter on campus. And so we'll also be sure to send out more information about DFA at Rice for everyone who attended. But with that, just like a round of applause for you, Hannah. Thank you so much. Safe travels to Korea. Enjoy every minute that you have with your family.
Thank you.
All right, bye everyone. Thank you.